Happy birthday, Tampa. My name is Shirley Fox Nose, City Clerk for the City of Tampa, and we are here today on Tampa's 137th birthday, and we are celebrating its history with our annual Archives Awareness Week. This brochure, which we'll talk about a little later, has a schedule for the week, which includes exhibits and a total of 14 programs with our Archives Awareness Week partners. Today we'll be learning about Tampa's history from City Councilman Charlie Miranda, as well as Fred Hearns, curator of Black History at the Tampa Bay History Center. They have both contributed articles in our new booklet, Tampa in 1924, only 100 years ago? Be sure to pick up a copy after the program. Before we begin, we would like to recognize our current and former elected officials who are in attendance. Yes, ma'am.
Hello, everybody.
This is Gwendolyn Henderson.
Oh, thank you, Charlie.
I'm Charlie Miranda.
He's the oldest, I'm the youngest. But we're both dragons.
That's right.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? We have with us Judge E.J. Salsinas and his lovely wife and guests. Really appreciate your attendance. Any other elected officials? Well, you all are very important, and we are so happy that you could join us. And the elected officials, thank you so much for your service. We really appreciate it. You are more valuable than you probably know, but we thank you. I am pleased to introduce our first speaker, Councilman Charlie Miranda, who was first elected to Tampa City Council in 1974. He is the second longest serving council member in history. He has spent a total of 30 years in office, and he recently received the John Land Years of Service Award from the Florida League of Cities. Please welcome Councilman Charlie Miranda.
Well, thank you, Shirley. Shirley is a wonderful person. She does a great job for the city of Tampa, but I'll never forget her name. Can anybody tell me why? Sure. Your wife, sir. My wife's name was Shirley, so I can never forget her name. So you got to have something like that going on. But thank you. You know, this journey started in 1974. In fact, it started when, actually started in 1970 when I ran for office. And you never say you lost. I just didn't get enough votes in a race for supervisor elections. And then I didn't learn my lesson in 70. So in 72, I said, I'm going to run again. And I'm going to run for county commissioner this time. I didn't figure it out that when I did the study of the votes, where they came from, I got by, you know what, beat up in the county, but I did very well in the city. However, that day when I went to qualify for the vote, I went to run for office. I went to the supervisors of elections office and got the okay, everything was fine. Then I had to go pay my qualifying fee. Well, I asked the young man, I said, let me ask you a question. I don't have to pay a poll tax, right? He said, no, you don't have to pay a poll tax. So if I don't have to pay a poll tax, I can vote for anybody I want, right? Yes, you can. I said, then how come I can't vote for myself if I got to pay a qualifying fee? Right. So he said, what do you mean by that? I said, nothing. I think it doesn't work. I think that everybody in this country has the right to seek office without paying a qualifying fee to run for office. And people told me, Charlie, you're crazy. That ain't never going to happen. I said, not going to happen, huh? So I got me an attorney named Steve the Deal, and we went to the courthouse, and we filed the lawsuit in Judge Ben Krinsman's office, a federal judge. And sure enough, about 3 days of an emergency hearing, he held a hearing, and he says, Mr. Miranda, I'll put you on the ballot under one condition. I said, what is that, Your Honor? He said, you got to get 3,500 registered voters to sign your petition within 4 days. Well, the other Shirley, the one I was married to, she knew a lot of other people, much more than I did. And when you go in politics, I'm going to give you all a favor and tell you what to do. Hang out with women because they vote more than men and they do twice the work we do. So my wife went out and got her friends, and we turned in 4,200 registered voters in 3 days. So they put me on the ballot, and I've never lost an election. I just never got enough votes. You got to understand that. You can't take things personal when you run for office. So in '74, I said, now I've got 2 losses and no wins. I didn't have that when I was a baseball player. So I said, this has got to change. So I told myself, I'm going to run for office again. Well, you know, when you do 3 times in a row, you kind of get a stigma that you can't finish the race. So I said, I got to do something different. So I told my wife, Shirley, I'm going to rent Curtis Sixer Convention Center. She said, you are crazy. And the center then was here on Ashley Street. So we rented that, and I said, I'm going to have some friends of mine show up that are really, really great in music. And those guys, one is called the Fabulous Rockers, which was broken up at that time, and Dennis Propeller was a leader, but he was doing heart surgery and all that stuff at that time and going to school and doing things. I think he did the 2nd heart transplant in the country. And he went to where? Jefferson High School. And so then I also have a friend of mine named Tony Milio, who was living on this side of the wall in New Jersey, and on the other side of the wall was a guy named Frankie Valli. So I got Milio to bring his group in to be one of the sponsors at no charge. And there was a great singer at South Florida named Maria Demeron. I got her to come in, and I got Chuck Boris, who used to be the lead guitar player and singer with the Rockers, to do a solo for me. So we sold the thing out, completely sold out. They didn't come see me. They came to see the music that was behind me. And you have to do things to help yourself win an election. Now, that night, or that morning, I should say, because everybody was worn out, dancing and having a nice time, I told myself, who cares about the election? And when I said, who cares, I stopped. And I wrote this one commercial. I'm Charlie Miranda, your Tampa City Council member, District 6. Who cares there's a pothole in your city street? Miranda cares. Who cares your electric bill is higher than your rent? Miranda cares. I need your help, your vote to make your voice heard at City Hall. Vote Miranda. That was it. No other commercial, nothing else. I did have many support. Labor, the newspapers. I had one newspaper that endorsed me. That was from St. Pete Times. And at that time, they didn't carry the weight that they carry even now in this area. So the election was held, and who cares? I knew I was going to win 2 weeks before the election, and let me tell you why. They would say, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so, here's so-and-so, and I didn't have a name. Here's who cares. And everybody knew me by who cares. So I still care, and that's why I'm still here, I guess. But, thank you. In '74, it was a little different the way you ran for office. Yes, there was 7 council members, that's the same there is now. But you had to live in a district, but you had to run citywide. And so happens, believe it or not, I got elected at District 5, my first election.
That's believable.
I says you, I want to give you congratulations. And therefore, I ran in District 5 and won. And I'm kind of an odd guy. I fluff things off, but I remember I thought I was treated kind of rudely by one of the editors of one of the largest newspapers. So I timed myself. I was there 17 minutes. And I knew I was going to, just by the way he looked at me. So I went back when I got elected and I asked him if I wanted to come see him. And he said, what for? I said, we're going to have a conversation. And I stood there in front of him and I talked to his conversation for 17 minutes. And I said, thank you for your time. I turned around and walked off. He got the message. Not that I wasn't endorsed. I treated him like he treated me. And I said, I'll never get another endorsement from that newspaper. And I was dead wrong. I got most of them. But life is what it is. And to be a public servant, you have to want to do it You're going to do it, and it's not easy. It's difficult. This morning I was in Tampa Bay about water issues, but that's not what I'm here about today. It wasn't until 1987 that they changed the formula of 7 council members, but districts of each run citywide. So you run 3 of you run in a citywide and 4 of you in a district. So that's what we have today. So in other words, you got districts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7, and you can run 4, 5, 6, and 7 are the ones that are district-wise, and the 3 that are 1, 2, 3 are the ones when you run citywide. And the salary's the same, everything's the same, other than when you run for citywide. When I first started running for office, $5,000 to $7,000 was adequate to see for a campaign. If you run in a district, it's maybe 60 or 70,000. If you run citywide, you can go up to 150,000. So it's very difficult because times are different. And let me explain that. When you had 12,000 people working in cigar factories, you could go every single day to a district factory. And some were in double shift then. And you can meet the people eye to eye, shake hands, and talk to them, give them a card, and say, I appreciate your support. Let me do what I can do for you. You also had Reynolds, Aluminum, Continental, and one other that I'm missing my mind right now on. But all those, you had the people you could hit by yourself in a 6-week period. I guarantee you it was 20,000 people. You shake hands. You had another thing that was a phenomenal thing. You had spaghetti dinners and fish fries, and you have 50, 100 people show up. If you have one now, the fish won't show up. It's not heard of. It's not done anymore. But I think somebody who would come back and do those things will be recognized, have a better chance of taking office than the way we do it now. Now you look for endorsements, and endorsements are a piece of paper that say nice things about you, which are mostly true, if not always true. But if the public, they want to see somebody, they want to talk to somebody face to face, shake hands, see the flesh. You know, I listen to people when they tell me something, I listen most what they don't say. And let me give you an example of that. When the convention center was here, we had no hotel as a convention hotel. And Dick Greco in 1997 or 1999, he went after the Marriott, and it was between the Marriott and I believe was the Hyatt to get the hotel built here. Well, the Marriott got it, the Hyatt didn't do it. The Hyatt was the 2nd or 3rd richest man in Mexico City. His name was Rodolfo Alcalá. And now somebody wrote an article in the newspaper saying that the reason the Mexicans didn't get it because it was drug money. And the guy went livid to all of us elected officials, including the mayor, really, really strong on Greco. So Greco calls me in the office, and I learned one thing. If he tells you Beto, leave, because it means something's trouble, and he wants you to do it. And he said, Beto, I need you to do me a favor. I said, yeah, sure, Dick, what is it? I want you to go to Mexico City and talk to this guy. I said, what? You want me to talk to the guy that they accuse of having drug money? If you can do it, I appreciate it. I told him, all right. I flew to Mexico City. That man talked to me in a long desk. He was from here, just across. He called me every name that's in the book. And I just looked at him. And he spoke to me in English. So I told him, yeah, wait till it's my turn. So I spoke to me in about 20 minutes, because you and Greco and the rest of you and this, who do you think I am? I listened to him. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What do you got to say? Bueno, te voy a decir una cosa. When I told him, te voy a decir una cosa, why the hell did you tell me you didn't speak Spanish? I said, oh, you spoke English. You're the man here, so I'm going to speak that whatever language you want. So that gave me an opening, and I knew I was looking for an opening. Then he asked me, where's my father born at? I said, Cienfuegos. We're leaving tomorrow for Cuba. You and I, hey, we take any plane? I said, I can't go to Cuba. At that time, it was not that you couldn't go at all. You don't need a passport. You travel with me. You don't. I said, listen, I'm not going to break the law of the United States of America. I'm not going to Cuba. As it happens, I was supposed to be there 2 days. I said there 4 days, because I told him I got to leave tomorrow. He tells me, you leave when I tell you can leave. If I'm dying, I'm lying. So I told myself, well, I guess I'm going to stay another day. So he says, I'm having a birthday, and I'm inviting you to my house. So we drove all through the hills and down and up. Finally, we got to a house, and it was on a plateau, beautiful thing. And it was like, here is the house. And I figured, well, solid rock, so the elevator cannot go down, it can only go up. I was wrong, it went down, because he built his house on the ledge of the big thing. If I'd have known that, I'd never got in. I looked down, I could see a house that big. Anyway, started talking to him, he said, let's have a drink. Well, I don't drink. So I said, okay, let's have a drink. So what we do is I do, again, and so his daughter tells me, my father must really like you because he hasn't taken a drink in 36 years. I said, well, I got news for your father. I didn't drink either. And we became kind of close. His house was so big, he had 2 mariachi bands playing. Not at the same time, but playing. And he was really nice. He says, I'm going to offer you a deal. I said, you're going to offer me a deal? What deal you want? He said, I'm going to make you vice president of this corporation in Florida. I said, I didn't come here looking for a job. But let me tell you what he had. He had something I haven't seen yet. How about if your water meter and your electric meter, you do not have to leave your house or you do not have to get a bill to pay it? I haven't seen one yet in America. He showed me in his wall where he moved a picture and there was a meter for the water and a meter for the electricity. And as you see the electricity, what you use and you want to buy is running out, you put your credit card, you want $100 worth, you put $100 worth, and it's charged to your account. Your water, the bill would come up what you owe, you dip your credit card, and you paid. I have not seen that in the United States yet, and that was 30 years ago. But it's an amazing thing that I have not seen those meters, and I saw them working in Mexico City. But not to change the subject about Mexico City, but let's go to the general elections. Those times have changed. We still don't have where the council and the mayor run at different times because it's costly to do that. So what's the odds that people who run for office will be the same ones? It can't be. You either change or you have people retire or whatever reason. The mayor still has 8-year terms, period. The council has 8 years. You can have your seat for 2-4 years, but you can run for citywide, you can run in a district, or district, you can run citywide. So that's how I got to be here. I mean, I wasn't here from 1974 to 1924. In fact, I look at the audience now and I see 2 of my partners from Cafe Pepe. John Rignon, who was a major stockholder, is right there in this 3rd row, and Mike Sierra. With the 3 left, there were 6 of us. The other 3 have passed away. And not to mention anything, but I think we're going to have a Cafe Pepe night at across the street at the University Club coming about September, October. But politics is the same. You still got to get elected. However, let me go about the voting process. Here's what really gets me. You had 1 election day, uno, and that was it. There was 0 early voting, and there was 0 vote by mail. That did not exist. And we would get 40% of the vote of the registered voters come out. With everything that we do to get the vote out, it's under 20%. 15 to 20. It's a shame that we're giving up our rights without even a struggle. You don't go to the polls. And I have to believe it has to be that everything is done through media. Yeah, they see you on television. Yeah, they see you in the newspaper. Yeah, they hear you on radio. But they never met you. They never shook your hand. You never looked at a person eye to eye, and that doesn't exist anymore. And I blame it on the lack of understanding on voice and looking at somebody. I think that means an awful lot. And that has not happened here in a long, long, long time. And it's getting worse. So fewer people are electing most of the people. That doesn't work in democracy. You have to have, in my opinion, at least 40% to come out. It's a different. The mayor's office used to be here when I first got elected. Where the Shirley's office is at was the mayor's office and the city clerk's office. And we had this hall, but we didn't have no offices. Those offices where we're at now belong to the mayor's staff. So Sandy Freeman and I would meet coincidentally at 10 minutes to 9, and we go in the door and go to the left and go speak to Elton White. So one day the mayor calls me, he says, let me ask you something. I said, what is it, Mayor? He says, how come you and Freeman come in on on council days, and you go see Elton White, and me being there? I said, Mayor, we got to talk to somebody who's got some brains. And he came right at me with something else. But he wasn't, Paul was like, oh, no, Paul was, he can give it and take it. One day he called me in the office. He said, sit down, I want to talk to you. I said, yes, sir. I want to tell you something. I said, what is it, sir? He said, you're too damn smart to be stupid. I said, what? Let me understand this. I'm too smart to be stupid? Exactly what I'm telling you. He said, you know what, the University of Tampa finished your last 2 years. And that's exactly what I did. And so he communicated in a way that it wasn't an insult. He wanted to open your eyes and let your ears understand what your eyes are looking at so you make the right decisions. He was like a father to a lot of us, and I miss him a lot. The budget of the city in 1974 was $300 million. You know what it is today? Yep, you have inside information. You're an insider, huh? The budget today is a little more than $2.2 billion with a B. However, let me put something else in perspective. You know, we're going to, they call the PIPES program. $2.9 billion. Because we're changing all the water lines and all the tertiary treatment lines in the city of Tampa. And that's over 4,000 miles of them under the city. So that's why you see not too much progress now in the paving of the streets, which will happen very soon. We're working now, we're about 25% finished on the PIPES program. But reason you don't want to pave and then open up again and say, look at the stupid people in government. They did something, now they're doing it again. So you have to take the good with the bad. So we're hoping that everything works out. It's going to be a wonderful upgrade. We were spending about $35 million a year sometime back and repairing pipes, not fixing them, just repair the hole, and then the next week it breaks somewhere else. The pipes were 80, 90, and 100 years old. So we've done a lot in the city. The taxpayers have had a wonderful time in living in Tampa, but now we have to pay to replace the things that are 100 years old. We're also working on the refuge to energy. That's going to be over $100 million. We're also doing many other things that need. A fire engine today, can anybody guess what a fire engine costs? Insider again, huh? I'm going to get you for insider trading, woman. About $850,000. An ambulance, because we use a 450 for the body doesn't decay that quick, it's about $450,000. So you can see that money comes in, but it also goes out right quick. And these are the things that we have to battle with. I was pleasure of mine that the first woman elected to city council was in 1971. Her name was Kathy Barger. Her and her husband Freddie had a shop there on North Boulevard, not Boulevard, but Bush Boulevard, just the other side of the railroad track on the right-hand side. Wonderful person, wonderful family. The two others that I got elected with, they did much better than I did. I was Jan Platt and Sandy Freeman. One became not only a great council member, both of them were. One became a county commissioner, the other became a mayor for 2 terms. So I had the pleasure of working with some really nice people. Not only her, but Joe Chalora, a bunch of individuals that were really, I haven't met one yet that has done it for a reason other than they want to give service. No mayor that I've worked with, I've worked with 5. I've worked Mayor Poe, Greco, Aurelio, Buckhorn, and Castor. None of those mayors had the same personality, none. But they had one thing in common. They wanted to make the city better than when they received it. And that's why we've been successful. We've had mayors in the past. I already had the toughest time because when everything caved in, we had to lay off like 754 people in the city to sustain ourselves. And she had a hard time, but she did a marvelous job in doing what she had to do. In fact, I went to see her once. I said, you know, we ought to start a medical clinic. She looked around. That's how the clinic started. She started the clinics in the city of Tampa. We have 2 clinics to keep our insurance costs down. We have one that I hope one day will move into the city of Tampa, it's in Brandon, and one on Hearns Avenue, just before MLK. So we've done things that are new and innovative. We have to keep changing. You cannot be the same in a city and be competitive in this world. You just can't do it. City Hall was different. Poe started the first revitalization of downtown. The quad block, when he told me, we're going to build a quad block. I said, you want more cops? He said, what? I said, isn't that quad mean cops? No, stupid, he told me, joking with me. He says, this is the buildings that I'm building here, and we're going to build the city center, which he did. Paul was very, very much, of all the mayors I work with, if I have to grade them in different areas, he was the most business one I've ever met. He was very well, but he knew what he was doing. He wasn't a care, yeah, take, yeah, no. He wanted all the facts to make a decision. Not that the others didn't do that, but he did it in a very professional way. So, in fact, I look at the audience, and in 1974, all we had was signs, and we made our own signs and a silk screen with ink and doing the thing. So we know what it is. Mike Sierra, my neighbor there, I worked him and his wife to death. I don't know how he's still living, but it is what it is. Sometimes comes around, goes around. What did he say? What comes around, goes around. We changed all the streets. Remember how they had two ways? We changed most of them to one-way streets. And during our administration, we changed most of them back. We left 2 or 3 that are major thoroughfares like Florida Avenue and Tampa Street, those. And it brought business back to help the people who were parking. They didn't have no parking. Who's going to park when everybody's going 40 miles an hour right next to you, all one way? Very few. So these things are helpful for what we did downtown. And a lot of people criticize downtown. Oh, how come it's not going all to downtown? You have to have a body has one thing you cannot live without. That's a heart. And every city that's got over 250,000 people has a vibrant downtown. If not, they cave in. You have to have an ambience where people come in. There was about 600 people living in downtown when I first got elected. It went down to almost 0. Now, because of the vibrancy of young people wanting to do things and have fun, enjoy the life, there's over 10,000. And we ain't not finished yet. That east side of Channel Side, what they call, it's only still got another third to go. And the high buildings that are coming on still is there. We have to do something, however, to make sure that the people who go to work every day can have an affordable place to live. And that has become very, very difficult. In my mind, that's the most difficult thing we've done now. We have to find an answer to that. And we're trying desperately. There's a goal of so many houses to be built. Maybe we won't hit that goal of 10,000, but I guarantee you, we're trying. There's houses building every day. Every time we have an apartment building complex, we ask for 20 or 30% of it to be affordable housing from 80 to 120 MII. That's the income that you have to have. And it's hard. No matter if you make $25 an hour and your spouse makes $25 an hour, it's still difficult because you ain't taking home $25 an hour. You're taking something less than that. And it's very difficult. I myself come from Tampa housing, and I don't mind saying it. I lived in 1860 Counter Court, and I had a blast. Why? Well, I had a building that was made out of blocks. I come from my house that had a furnace heater. This one had a gas heater, and it had a hot water heater for hot water. And the housing projects, that was in the 50s. And we still think we got something new. Solar panels are not new. They're used differently. But one day I had people in here that were very nice. And they were asking the government to do all these things. I said, don't ask any government to do something you yourself haven't done. You have to set the example. And I'm talking about what you drive, what kind of grass you have. I have no grass. What kind of solar system do you have? So the government keeps moving, and it becomes something that it's hard to understand what a government is, because you think government's very, very slow. You sit here for 2 or 3 weeks, and we try to do things. Sometimes you get them done, sometimes you don't. But the problem is you can't get mad. We have a country that's mad with itself. This country is about ready to blow up, and we don't realize that. No matter if you're on the right or on the left, it's got to change. This killing in America has got to stop. But I know that's away from the city of Tampa. But Tampa has the same problem that anybody has, because we, the citizens of Tampa, know better. And it just takes a long, long time to do these things. Anyway, when you seek office in Tampa, you're taking up an awesome responsibility. Every neighborhood is different, but yet every neighborhood needs the same thing. They need to be safe, they have to have better streets, they have to have plentiful water, and they have the right to have fun. We have spent monies galore. You know why I think we done that? I can only tell from my own experience. The only park I had to play in was Cascaden Park. I had to walk about 1.5 miles to get there. And I'd do it every day. Because the park teaches you about communication with people. It teaches you about winning and losing. It teaches you about being able to do things and be recognized or not recognized for. And today, education and ability to live where you live and have a decent place to go. I voted for a park that's $40 million. Let me say that again, $40 million. And I'd do it again if I have to. You know why? Those individuals, those young kids that are going there are going to see something they would never see ever. And that $40 million may save you a lot more than the 40. You're going to get a return on your money. Look at Judy B. Lane Park. That's wonderful. The city is trying to do things to make everybody realize that they're needed, that they're wanted, and most of all, they have the opportunity to go upward mobility. I want to give somebody a hand up, not a push down. And I think the council feels the same way, and the mayor feels the same way. Like I said earlier, it's not easy to be elected. How many of you would think that you would like to run for office one day, especially the young people in the back? I must be in the wrong profession. I can't believe none of you do. One. Thank you. Bravo. But we are here to say that the city of Tampa is 137 years old, but the heart of the city of Tampa is very young. It's pumping blood all over. We want to make it well. If you see something you need, something you think that we're doing, don't hesitate to call your council member or the mayor. They'll answer you back. But thank you for inviting me today, just a few lessons of what I've learned. And it's easy to say you're going to do it. It's a little harder when you try to do it. But thank you for inviting me.
Bravo.
Do you have a question for Charlie?
Yes, sir.
When are they gonna take down the behemoth office building here with no windows and build something nice?
You mean Fort Tampa?
No,
Fort, the fort, yeah, I call it the fort.
Fort, okay, yeah.
I don't know about that. It was built in, under the Poe administration, I believe it was in 79. It was completed. Well, if you look at the record, I can only say I don't know. I really don't. I don't know if there's any plan for it at all, to be honest with you. You have to ask the administration that. Maybe they're doing something that myself or Gwen Henderson are not aware of. Just one question, you gonna let me off that easy? That's it? Students, speak up.
The winning lottery numbers, can you give us that?
Yes, there's 7 of them, but I won't give them to you. Yes, ma'am.
There was I guess, a rumor about a building on Channel Side further down between, by Ybor City, that there was going to be something big going on there. But there isn't, I just wondered if that was in the books for the future.
Well, yeah, and correct me, Gwen, if I'm misleading. What's going to happen between Channel Side and Ybor City is spectacular. You're going to have about 5,500 apartments and buildings to live in that are being done right now. And the plans are being constructed right now. You see, right off of Cass in Nebraska, there's already building some, but there's going to be a gateway to Ybor City, and the sidewalks are going to be about 12 feet wide, if I remember the conversation. And you're going to have a bunch of all new stuff. So Ybor City is in a renaissance of changing again, in my opinion. Not maybe so quickly, but it will change back to being residential like I was when I was a kid. Yes, sir.
As a council member, what are some of the unusual requests you've had from some of your constituents?
I knew I'd have never called on him, but no. You know, One guy calls me, he's a nice guy, and I try to tell him I can't move that. And I hope he's not listening, but he says, you know, my grandson's gonna get killed because of trucks and all that. And I said, but the building before you that the city has is not a building. It's an old trailer that we're storing some of the pipe program I told you about. The equipment goes there, and then they take it out and bring it in, whatever. And it's owned by the city. There's a pump station right next to it. We have it fenced out. We have it even screened out around the fence so you can't see in and out. And I know he's doing it because he thinks that it should be done that right way. But I've given it to the city. We can't move that for at least another 2 years because we're using it as a staging area to facilitate the contractors to do the piping program that we need. And I just, that's all over the city. There's 4 or 5 areas that we do that so that the job gets done. And by the way, that pipe program is gonna take about 22 years to finish because it's a big one. That's an odd one. Yes, ma'am.
Maybe in the spirit of inspiring young people to run for office, are there any projects that you've been involved with or supported that have given you, made you feel good about what you're doing?
You know, what makes you feel good is that you present your part of what you think it should be. And even if part of it is done, you said, I did something good today. And when you go home and you go to sleep, you say, I wonder if I gave it my best. And when you say that to yourself, the answer is yes. Yes, sir.
With all the experiences you've gained in life, what is the best piece of advice you'd give to students in our generation?
To the students, there's 3 things I'm gonna tell you to do. Study, study, and study. And you'll never get mad at yourself for learning. You'll get mad at yourself if you don't learn and if you don't study. I can tell you by myself. I went to school the first year, grammar school. They kicked me out because the first 2 weeks, I didn't speak one word of English. I sat in the front row, middle seat. I didn't know what the hell they were saying. The window was open, so that's my way out. So I jumped out, went out. I did that for 2 weeks, and they called my mother and said, you got to take him, he's disruptive. I guess I was, but there was no side of me. Where am I going to learn English? The doctor, the pharmacist, my mother, my father, everybody in the neighborhood was Spanish. The pharmacist, the guy who put the bread and the nail in the front door so that the rats don't eat it, all that stuff, the ice, everything was Hispanic. So where I came from, Ybor City, there was very little people that spoke English. There was no need to. You had your own community, really. But
Thank you very much. Thank you so
how
much.
about this? Do not run for office again. Only joking, Shirley.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all very much for allowing me to be with you.
Bravo.
Thank you very much again, Charlie. We would now like to welcome Fred Hearns, curator of the Black History at the Tampa Bay History Center. He has 2 masters, one in human services from Springfield College and one in Africana Studies from the University of South Florida. I might add also that Fred is a 32-year employee. He was a 32-year employee of the city of Tampa. Today, he will be discussing Tampa in 1924. Fred, you were here then? Anyway, welcome, Fred.
Well, thank you, Shirley, and good afternoon, everyone. Hopefully we can get out of here before the rain gets any worse. I heard that thunder out there. But, you know, living in Tampa, we expect this, right? We're the lightning capital of the world. During the summer months, we know every day it's going to rain. We just don't know exactly what time, either 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock. I appreciate the invitation that I've had for the last several years to come and share with you the city of Tampa's birthday on National Archives Awareness Week, when we get to talk about history. And this is also, in addition to talking about some of the things that were happening 100 years ago in 1924 here in Tampa. 200 years ago was the founding of Fort Brooke. And many of you all probably know that story. And that was really the beginning of what we now have as the city of Tampa, when that military fort was established. And now I think the only thing we have still named Fort Brooke is the parking garage. But when I talk about it, I say, you know that big parking garage downstairs with the overhead walkway? Yeah, that's the Fort Brooke parking garage. And at the Tampa Bay History Center, you know, we have maps, we have drawings of what it looked like inside the fort and so forth. I'm also so happy now that Fort Brooke Cotonchobee Park is reopened, because we had some construction going on there for a couple of years. And now when I look out the window at the History Center, and you see out there people walking their dogs and jogging, and I mean, it is really wonderful to see what we're doing, because we work in the Channel Side District, those of us at the History Center. And the building right next door used to be our parking lot. And years ago when I was on the board at the History Center, I mean, that's where we parked. And so much has changed now. So what I did want to do is just say one word before I begin the presentation about a name that was mentioned earlier when Mr. Miranda was talking about his memories, and that's the name of Alton White. Alton White is the reason that I'm standing here today. Back in 1974, shortly after he ran for mayor, and while he didn't win, he threw his support to Bill Poe, and when Bill Poe became mayor, he created a position for this African-American man, executive assistant to the mayor. First time that position, to my knowledge, ever existed. And Alton White brought so much to that position. He didn't come there looking for something. He brought much to that position. He hired hundreds of people who probably never would have had an opportunity to work for city government had he not had the connections that he had with the federal government. A lot of federal money came down, and Mayor Poe would tell people, he said, you know, I don't really have a lot of those connections. That's Alton White who's doing that. Never wanted any publicity for himself, never sought it, but I always like to just tell people what a great man he was. And so whatever good I have done, whatever that might be here in Tampa, I owe so much of it to his memory. And at that time, we had the Office of Community Relations, later became a Department of Community Affairs. And I've been retired, Shirley, for 17 years. But when I talk about the city, I still say we. And I have to remind myself, okay, I don't work for the city anymore, but actually I still do, because at the History Center, you know, we're promoting this place we call Tampa, Florida. And I can just tell you that a few weeks ago, we had some 30,000 of my fraternity brothers here, the Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and they just raved about Tampa. I expect to see some of them move to Tampa at some point. I mean, they really loved it. So today, we're going to talk about Tampa in 1924, and when we were under commission rule of city government. That was sort of an experiment that we had for 6 years here, and it was sort of a deviation from what we have today. For example, as Mr. Miranda just mentioned, we have a strong mayor form of government. We have city council members elected at large and in districts, sort of a combination. The mayor appoints, in some cases, I know it happened when I retired from the city of Tampa, we had a city manager, I think that was his title. So that may or may not happen under different mayors. But it was a little different back in the 20s, so I'm going to get into that. I drew primarily from 4 texts, and there was a lot more information I got from other places, but Dr. Bob Kirstein, who still today is a good friend of mine, taught for many years history at the University of Tampa, retired some time ago. He and his wife are enjoying retirement in downtown St. Petersburg, where they live, and then they spend 6 months out of the year up in New York. They're probably up there now because during the summertime. Politics and Growth in 20th Century Tampa, which he published in 2001. Also Mayor Pamela Orio's articles, and the one that I especially drew from, Colorless Primaries, Tampa's White Municipal Party, published in 2000. Also, I draw heavily on the work that the city clerk's office does under Shirley and Jennifer and Allison and the other employees there every year when they come out with these booklets that are behind me that give you history of the city mayors, city council members, city clerks, and just invaluable information because it synthesizes the things that I'm looking for when I'm going to do a talk about the city of Tampa. There are basically three themes that I'm going to touch on in my talk today. One of them is an idea that came from Bob Kirstein's book. He talks about the commercial civic elite. Commercial civic elite, not Republicans or Democrats, the commercial civic elite. The city fathers, and they were pretty much all men, especially during the time that I'm going to talk about, and how they made decisions both as members of government and as champions of industry, commercial civic elite. Another theme is the agenda-setting function of the media, where we had the Tampa Morning Tribune and the Tampa Daily Times that existed for many, many years at the same time. Many of us remember that, and how they competed and they supported or did not support certain political candidates for office. And they really did influence our local politics tremendously. And then the third thing is the theme of the traditional mayor council versus the commission form of government. Now, what is a commission form of government? That's primarily what I'm going to zero in on, which was a concept that I'm sure many people supported in 1920 who did not support it in 1927 because the laws changed. And so we had this form of government where there were only a handful of people who ran the city. So we'll get into that. I want to start at 1908, talking about some personalities. And Zachariah D. Green, or Z.D. Green, who was an attorney, an African-American attorney, well-trained, equipped to do whatever was needed by way of being a practicing attorney, who decided here in Tampa that he wanted to run for a municipal judgeship. And so he filed the proper paperwork, and just before the deadline to file, he was told that your paperwork has been lost. And it was too late for him to file again, and so he didn't get a chance to run for that position. This was 1908. And so some of the commercial civic elite got together and decided that we've got to make sure that this never happens again. This was someone who was qualified, but someone who happened to be African American. And so that was the genesis of what became what I mentioned earlier, where we had the white municipal party. So if you were not white, you couldn't even run for, you couldn't get on the ballot, you couldn't vote from 1910 to 1947. Now, I was born in 1948, so this was not that long ago. This was an impediment to anyone who looked like me even thinking about participating in the political process. So Z.D. Green, that was 1908, and then we had the party in 1910 that began to determine who was going to serve in office, and black people were not included. On August 13th, 1908, that's when the party was founded. It was led by Mayor McKay, D.B. McKay, who would serve several terms as mayor of the city of Tampa. And here's a quote from the newspaper talking about the goal of that party. It was to prevent the future operation of the Negro vote as a balance of power in municipal elections. And that's exactly what it did. In 1910, we had 3,592 white people who voted for mayor. And Mayor McKay won in a runoff. And that was the first term he served as mayor, but it would not be his last. In 1923, Kirstein pointed out that the chairman of the White Municipal Party thought that there might be some opposition to what they were doing, what they had put in motion. And, quote, their success would make the primary system futile and mean the return of the Negro in city politics. And that was to be avoided at all costs. Now, blacks had held positions in local government during Reconstruction, so this is not something that had never happened before. In 1867, Frederick Newberry was the first black political figure. He served in the voter registration office. He served on that board at a time when we had 211 whites who were registered voters in Tampa and 87 blacks. So he was doing an excellent job along with the others. But it wouldn't be until 1976, after the establishment of the White Municipal Party, until a black person was elected to a local office in Hillsborough County. And that wasn't city council, that was school board, Reverend A. Leon Lowry. So all of those decades had passed by without any black representation in local elected office. We have some photos that I want to share, and this is Mayor McKay, Tampa's 38th and 42nd mayor. He actually served as mayor for a total of 13 years. He was the grandson of the 6th mayor of Tampa, Captain James McKay, one of our early pioneers, who came here from Alabama in 1846. Shortly after he arrived, there was that great flood in the late 1840s, but he rebuilt and he stayed. Some people left, but he decided that he was going to stay here and make Tampa his home. D.B. McKay is also the son of Tampa City Councilman John A. McKay. Now, Captain McKay Sr. owned a general store, he owned a sawmill, he purchased real estate, he bought 2 schooners, but where he really made his mark was in the cattle industry. His primary partner was Jacob Summerlin from the Orlando area, and they were selling their cattle, their Florida cattle, to Cuba for gold. Very lucrative business. Captain McKay was also a blockade runner during the Civil War for the Confederacy. And he was actually captured by the Union Navy at one time, served several months behind bars until he signed a loyalty oath saying that he would be loyal to the federal government, to the United States government. Now, Mayor D.B. McKay began working as an apprentice at the age of 14 for the Tampa Tribune. At the age of 14. He worked his way up. Later, he left the Tribune and went to the Times. And he supported cigar manufacturers in their battle against the Cigar Workers International Union. When Don Vicente Martinez Ybor and others brought the cigar industry here in the 1880s, and we became the cigar capital of the world, the people rolling the cigars, many of them desired to be members of unions. And so we had strikes, we had a lot of conflict, we had violence around people supporting the unions as opposed to many of the leaders in government who wanted to keep the workers quiet and eliminate any strife, any conflict. And so we had constant battles between cigar manufacturers and workers and the unions. Let's see if we can move quickly. It's one of my favorite photos. It's not very clear, but This is the Hugh McFarland family. Hugh McFarland, Francis Pettingrill McFarland, and their 2 children, Mary and Howard. And we generally credit Hugh McFarland as or certainly one of the primary founders of West Tampa. We all are familiar with McFarland Park. I'm sure at one time or the other you've driven down Howard Avenue, named for his son. But just a word or two about Mrs. McFarland. Now, we know that it was in 1920 that white women got the vote. Not blacks, white women got the vote in 1920. And so I think that the city fathers, they could see that progress was coming and they couldn't forever keep women, quote, in their place. And so as sort of a gesture of goodwill toward women in the community, they appointed some women to serve on some of the advisory committees. They didn't encourage them to run for office, but they did put them on advisory committees, okay? And Mrs. McFarland was one of those people. And as I mentioned, Howard, who became a very successful attorney, Howard Avenue is named for him. And Mrs. McFarland, Frances McFarland, was a owner of a bookstore when she and her husband came to Tampa. And so that was the beginning of the West Tampa Library. That was the beginning of the West Tampa Library. I believe it was 1914 or 1915. 1914, Judge, thank you. And so, and I would bet we probably still have a few books, I would hope, that she gave to the library. And you know, at that time, West Tampa was a separate city from the city of Tampa. So West Tampa actually had a library long before the city of Tampa had a public library. But Mrs. McFarland had a lot to do with the establishment of that library. This is taken from a bust on the Riverwalk, and some of you may, how many people have passed by Kate Jackson's bust on the Tampa Riverwalk? Okay, you know, we have 30 bronze busts on the Riverwalk. Judge Salsinas and I were part of that committee along with some other very fine people that chose those 30 people. Several of them are females, several of them are African Americans. So we have a good mixture of the 30 that are on the Riverwalk. This is Kate Jackson. In 1920, she was elected vice president of the Home Rule Club Executive Committee. So again, these were clubs and organizations that helped to energize people to make them go out and vote. But again, no women were encouraged to run for office, but they could serve on these committees to support the men who were running and who were still in charge of local government. She was the daughter of the surveyor for much of Tampa during the early days, and many of our streets still carry those names that Mr. Jackson gave them, like Jackson Street, which is not named for Andrew Jackson, even though I thought that for years. It's named for John Jackson, the surveyor. He also owned a general store, and she was a founder of the Sacred Heart Catholic Church. In 1881, a founder of the Academy of the Holy Names. Her brother was the city of Tampa's 15th and 24th mayor, so he served 2 different terms, Thomas Jackson. And she also was the founder of the Tampa Civic Association. So the first civic association in the city, she's credited as the founder of that organization. Also, she was involved in recreation, helping to promote recreational areas, and something that was very important at that time. We don't think about it now, but it was very important at that time. She helped to support a spitting ordinance. A lot of people were chewing tobacco at that time, and so forth. She deeded her home to the Catholic Church. Later on, in 1944, the city of Tampa purchased that building. And in the 1970s, it was in disrepair, was torn down. But that is now the site of the Kate Jackson Recreation Center on Rome Avenue. And it was dedicated in 2003 by Mayor Dick Greco. This was the home when she lived in it, 821 South Rome Avenue. Mayor Perry Greenwald II, the city's 41st mayor from 1924 to 28. So he was actually mayor in the year that we're talking about, 1924, 100 years ago. He was our mayor. He was a brother-in-law of Peter O'Knight, who owned Knight and Wall Hardware, sporting goods store, and held many other important positions in the city. And I'm going to get into that in just a moment. Mayor Wall sat on the school board at one time. He was a city council member. He chaired the congressional and the county Democratic committees and the executive committee of the White Municipal Party. In 1923, he argued that there would be no democratic accountability if the city charter were revised. So again, from 1920 to 1927, we had this commission rule on city government, where you had a mayor, four, the name was, I think, representatives, but they were sort of like city council members today, if you can think of city council members, who were all citywide, who were all elected at large. None of them were for any specific district of the city. And you had a city manager that the city councilman appointed, and they also appointed all of the department heads in the city of Tampa. Can you imagine today our mayor appointing all the department heads, whether any had seniority or not? And I can imagine that that was maybe not the best way to do things, because how can one person be able to judge who's most qualified, especially now, of course, the city is much larger. But when you have several different departments where a certain amount of expertise, I think, would be required in order to do the best job, and you would kind of want people who have studied that industry to make those decisions, at least I would. But that's not the way things were done during these 7 years between 1920 and 27. That commission appointed department heads. So we also know that Mayor Wall did some pretty important things during the time he was mayor. He oversaw the development of an area, this is not in the city limits, but Temple Terrace, with 1,500 acres of orange groves. He also oversaw the construction of Tampa Municipal Hospital, which of course is now Tampa General Hospital on Davis Islands. Bob Kirstein quoted Mayor Wall as saying, and I quote, "One could not approve upon the present system in which a Florida cracker hounds a Negro, a mule, and a shovel." Let's go to another photo. This is Peter O'Knight, State Attorney Peter O'Knight. In 1924, 100 years ago, he became president of Tampa Electric Company. He remained president until 1946. Peter O'Knight was born in Pennsylvania. He came with his family to Fort Myers. His mother wanted to move here for the same reason many of us came to Florida, our ancestors, because of the warm weather, and it was good for her health. He later became mayor of Fort Myers. Then he took his talents to Tallahassee, where he served in the legislature. He became chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and he was persuaded by someone he met in Tallahassee, General Joseph B. Wall, to become his law partner and return to Tampa, and he did so. He married and settled in Hyde Park at 245 Hyde Park Avenue. There's a historic marker there. Some of you have been inside the Knight House there. It's a historic building, and it's a stone throw away from University of Tampa. He was, again, our state attorney, but he decided after that that he did not want to continue to serve in public office. He thought he could make more of a difference, and he desired to be involved in several local businesses and corporations, as Tampa, again, was growing in leaps and bounds in the 1920s. And so he helped to organize or headed the following businesses: Exchange National Bank, the Tampa Gas Company, Tampa Hardware Company, Tampa Phosphate Company, Tribune Publishing Company, the Florida Brewing Company, Tampa Shipbuilding and Engineering Company, Sanchez and Haya Realty Company, Tampa Union Station Company, and many, many more. I ran out of paper. I couldn't list them all. Peter O. Knight. Now, he helped to establish Tampa's first harbor terminal on a small little island that we know as Harbor Island. He developed a small airport on Davis Islands, and there was a lot of opposition to that. There was a lot of local opposition from the residents as well as some other folk who didn't think that was a good idea to have an airport on Davis Islands. But it happened, and it's named in his honor, the Peter O. Knight Airfield. He supported Tampa cigar manufacturers, opposed the union members. Peter O. Knight died in 1946, and he is the founder of what later became, in 1968, Holland and Knight Law Firm. Charles Brown. How many of you have heard of Charles Brown before? Mayor Brown, okay. This is Mayor Charles Brown, Tampa's 40th mayor. He was one of Florida's largest landowners, president of Tampa and Gulf Coast Railroad, founder of the Tampa Bank of Commerce. He defeated attorney Pat Whitaker for the mayor's position. He was the first mayor elected under this commission form of government, again, where you had 6 people pretty much running the city of Tampa. A mayor, and the only difference between the power of the mayor and the other commissioners at that time, the mayor got to preside over the meetings. But his vote carried no more weight than any other commission member's vote. And he didn't get to choose the city manager. They all chose the city manager. And the mayor didn't get to choose the department heads. They all got to choose the department heads. You can see why there were some people who were not happy with this system, but it stayed in place for about 7 years. So under Charles Brown, we had the development of the beginning of West Tampa as annexed into the city of Tampa, Seminole Heights, Jackson Heights, Gary, and other areas in the county. Wallace Stovall, publisher of the Tampa Morning Tribune, who helped to defeat Mayor McKay's Tampa Daily Times organization in 1920 by arguing that McKay's reign only benefited a few people and supported widespread gambling, alcohol, of course we had prohibition from 1920 to 1933, and corruption. And Charlie Wall's name always got thrown in those conversations. Even if Charlie was 1,000 miles away, his name was going to be thrown into that conversation whenever folk talked about illegal activities in Tampa. Wallace Stovall said of Peter O. Knight, and they were constant enemies politically, and he did not mean this as a compliment, but Stovall said of Peter O. Knight, the Tribune uses the lowercase. Only Jesus Christ and Peter O. Knight are capitalized. Stovall supported higher taxes for development purposes. And of course, he would benefit from some of those decisions. Now, let's talk about a few African Americans during this time, because this is an area, a topic that we don't always talk a lot about, but there were a lot of black folk who were moving here also, not necessarily to work in the cigar factories, but because of the cigar factories and the people who were coming, they needed goods and services, and they needed things that government could provide, and they needed clothing, they needed food, they needed everything that everybody else needs to survive. So black people even if they were doing unskilled jobs, which they were for the most part, unskilled labor or domestic work, were coming here at the same time that whites were moving to the area. George Schroeder Middleton came to Tampa from Charleston, South Carolina. In the 1890s, he moved in with Isaac and Polly Howard on Harrison Street. He actually married their daughter, Margaret. They lived for a while on Scott Street as a couple, and they also owned property at the College Hill Cemetery over on the east side of town. He worked until a mail carrier until the Woodrow Wilson administration began terminating positions held by black folk in federal government just before the United States entered World War I. And he was one of the victims of those terminations. But brilliant man, he learned the insurance business. And he worked his way up the ladder until he became Secretary Treasurer of the Central Industrial Insurance Company. And all this was happening in the 1920s, 1924, in that era. He served the insurance company under, at that time, its president, Dr. Mary McLeod Bethune, who spent a lot of time in Tampa. She was president of Central Industrial Insurance Company for a while, in addition to being president of Bethune-Cookman College in Daytona Beach. Middleton became president of the Paul Laurence Dunbar Literary Society, the Negro Department of the Southwest Florida State Fair. He helped to found the Negro Board of Trade, inspired by Booker T. Washington. And in 1924, Middleton and other members of the Tampa Urban League Education Committee laid the groundwork for the opening in 1925 of the first building constructed as a junior-senior high school for black students in Tampa, Booker T. Washington Junior-Senior High School. And by the way, next year will be the 100th anniversary of Booker T. Washington. And so we're going to be calling on our friends in the city to help us celebrate that achievement. It's still open. It's now an elementary school. It's in that area, Councilman, that where all this growth is taking place between Ybor and downtown. I'm hoping that Booker T. Washington will be here for another 99 years. That's my hope. And so also we know that Middleton knew on a first name basis. He knew these people, he worked with these people. Booker T. Washington, who he helped bring here in 1912. He gave a speech at the casino in Plant Park. In 1916, George Middleton helped bring Dr. W.B. Du Bois to Tampa, where he gave a speech on Central Avenue at the Odd Fellows Hall, and he was the guest of a local group who fed him chicken and yellow rice, and he talked about that in his memoirs of coming to Tampa. And Middleton also worked with James Weldon Johnson, the founder of, not the founder, but the author of the Negro National Anthem, Lift Every Voice and Sing, and also the man who organized the Tampa branch of the NAACP. So George Middleton was somebody. And so we wanted to just give you a little insight into what he was doing in 1924. This is Ann Lowe. And this is one of the people who I really am going to put in a little plug here. We need a historic marker for Ann Lowe in Tampa. We really do. We know where she lived when she lived in Tampa. But she came to Florida from Alabama, where she learned to be a dressmaker at her mother's feet. And she became so skilled that she caught the attention of a resident of Hillsborough County, Josephine Edwards Lee, a wealthy socialite who actually brought her from Alabama to her home on Lake Thonotosassa. Lee had 6 children. Most of them were girls, and so it was a lot of work for a talented seamstress to do. And so Ann Lowe began making dresses, outfits for her girls, and also Gasparilla gowns. And that's where she really made her name. And once women saw the work that Ann was doing, they wanted her to make dresses for them and for their children. And so on and on and on her fame went. She lived for a while in the Scrub on Pierce Street, and then later at 1514 Jefferson Street. 1514 Jefferson Street, because she needed to live close to her customers. Most of them lived in Tampa, not near Thanodisassa. So she moved into the city. She was doing so well that she was encouraged by Miss Lee to go to school at Manhattan, in Manhattan, New York, and learn the finer skills of French dressmaking, to use some of the techniques that the French were using. She did so. She completed the course. She opened her own shop. She did well for a while, but a black woman in New York kind of running a business on her own could not compete with the larger stores that were getting their fashion directly from Paris. And that's what people wanted. So eventually she wound up coming back to Tampa. But in 1960, she appeared on the Mike Douglas show. And how many of you remember Mike Douglas? Okay, we're telling our age now. Young people, there was a talk show. You guys know what a talk show is, right? There was a talk show that a man named Mike Douglas, very popular, probably the most popular talk show for a number of years here in this country. And this black woman from the Scrub, that neighborhood that black people lived in Tampa between downtown and Ybor, was called the Scrub, made it all the way to international fame. And we actually have some of her interview on tape. You can actually see her being interviewed by Mike Douglas. So we need to lift her up. But the thing that she's most known for, and I'll move on to the next one after this, she became acquainted with the Auchincloss family out of New York City. And they had a daughter named Jacqueline who would marry John F. Kennedy. And Ann Lowe made not only Mrs. Kennedy's wedding dress, but the dresses of all the bridesmaids and many of their friends. And Ann Lowe is a treasure. I understand we have, I think, one or two of her dresses at Tampa Bay Hotel, at the museum there. We have one of her dresses at the Tampa Bay History Center. And there's a book that came out last year about her life, full of beautiful colors of the work that Ann Lowe did. And yet she's still pretty much unknown here in Tampa. So we're getting near the end of the presentation. This is one of Ann Lowe's dresses. And the lady wearing the dress isn't bad either. Somebody said beautiful. That's Mrs. Kennedy. All of these dresses were made by Ann Lowe. John Bates Henry, born in North Carolina on a farm, came to Tampa around 1900. He started a hauling business with a team of mules and a wagon. And then later on he got a truck and, he sort of advanced, but that was sort of how he earned his money. This photo was actually taken from a postcard where he must have been doing pretty good with his business. He actually had these postcards made and he would mail them out to different people supporting his business. He came to Tampa looking for these opportunities and he found them, and he began attending church in what is now Channelside, which at that time was called the Garrison. A working class neighborhood, a lot of African Americans lived in the Garrison. That's where the church was, the Garrison Center, or the Garrison Mission. But they had to move from there because the property next door was sold and a livery stable opened there. And with the horses, and you know what it's like dealing with horses, with their waste, next to a church, they had to sell the church property. So they moved to the east side of town to Chipko Street, and that's where the Pleasant Chapel African Methodist Episcopal Church was established. And his family, well, some of the founders, John Bates Henry's family, of that church. Now he had a daughter and a son. His daughter married a man named Israel Tillman, who became one of Perry Harvey's supervisors. They called them headers. I think they may still call them headers. But they were the guys who were over different crews. When the ships would come in, They'd have a certain number of crews that would go and unload the ship, and then another crew would come and load other goods onto the ship. They were making good money for black men at that time in unskilled positions, many of whom had not come close to finishing high school. But Perry Harvey Sr. Was a master businessman, humanitarian, headed that union for over 30 years. He was replaced by his son, Perry Harvey Jr. And now we come back to Tampa City Council, first black elected in this century to Tampa City Council. In 1983, Mr. Harvey began serving as a councilman. And he also headed the Longshoremen Union for about 30 years, up to his death. Now, his son, Charlie Henry, had a son whose name was Virgil. And Virgil became a businessman in West Tampa. For about 25 years, he headed the very successful Barbecue King restaurant on Main Street. Some of you may be familiar with it. Right now, that whole block is closed off. I'm not sure exactly what's happening there, what's going to happen, but that's where the Barbecue King was located for many, many years. One of Tampa's oldest black-owned businesses. Was open for over 70 years. And of course, last but not least, we come to one of Tampa's most colorful gentlemen, Mr. Charlie Wall. Charlie Wall, Charles McKay Wall, his full name, in 1924 was reported to be one of those people involved in what was called a crime wave in Tampa. You know, I think some of this was propaganda. I don't think Tampa's crime was that much worse than many other places. But when there's competition between cities for businesses and growth and so forth, council members, you know that, it's not uncommon for someone to throw mud your way, and you don't want to go to Tampa. Too much crime there. But Charlie Wall's name would always come up, it would seem, when these conversations were to be had. Now, it is a fact that in 1924, there were over 1,000 slot machines in the city. And the quotation is, they were, quote, a menace to the health and morals of school children who frequently lost all their lunch money. Widespread bolita numbers games and underground casinos in Ybor City, the Times pointed out, and called this part of a gambling industry. The distribution and manufacture of alcohol, of course, during Prohibition, all of this was against the law. But there were boats coming in from Cuba, the British West Indies, there were moonshine stills in Pasco County and Hernando County, so forth and so on. It's been said that at one time, Charlie called himself the king of bolita. We know in 1950, Senator Estes Kefauver and the Kefauver Commission were holding these hearings all over the United States about gambling, and they came to Florida. Miami was one of the cities they visited. Tampa was another. Charlie Wall was one of the people who testified. 5 years later, and of course he, from what I understand, named names, gave out a lot of information about enemies of his, and 5 years later he was found horrifically murdered in his home. From what I've read, it seemed that there was no forced entry, so it was probably someone who knew him. He was bludgeoned with a baseball bat. His throat was cut. There's currently a young lady living in that home in Ybor City, so the home is still standing. But the ironic thing about the way that Charlie met his demise is that his grandfather, Dr. John P. Wall, Jr., is the medical doctor who discovered, after studying this for over 2 years, the cause of yellow fever, which was killing people, I mean, at a horrendous rate for many, many years in the late 1800s. And he found out after this 2-year study that it was the mosquito that was responsible for spreading the disease so rapidly. And many people doubted him and didn't think that his research was sound enough. But lo and behold, it did turn out that he knew exactly what he was talking about. He had the evidence. Dr. Walter Reed got a lot of the credit for this discovery, but it was actually more than 20 years before Dr. Reed did his studies that Dr. Wall pointed out that it was the mosquito that was responsible. And so when he began isolating people from the mosquitoes and found out that they were not being inflicted, that was one of the methods that he used to determine the cause of the problem. So once it was isolated and we made war against the mosquitoes and began devising ways that people would not be exposed to these mosquito bites, then we saw a turn in things as far as that was concerned. So one question I'd like to ask, and you can think about this, and I've hit on a lot of different subjects and we've talked about a lot of different people, but which system of government was better? If you think about the system that we have today with a strong mayor, at-large, district representatives representing city council, the mayor appoints department heads, mayor's budget is approved by council, but you have 7 council members as opposed to in the 1920s, from 1920 to 1927, 4 council members, a mayor who had no more power than the other 4, and they determined who the department heads were, and they determined who the city manager was going to be, as opposed to the system that we have now. In 1927, the voters decided that they had had enough of this commission form of government, and so they voted to change the charter back to what they had done before 1920. And once again, we had Mayor McKay coming back into office, and that is pretty much a part of our history that I think, as I always say, history is something that if we would pay attention, we could learn a lot from it. So there were lessons, if you want to read further about this era in city government, that I think we learned, and I think we're better for it. Thank you very much.
Do we have a couple of questions for Mr. Hearns?
I got one.
Yes, sir.
They mentioned you attended Springfield College, is that
Yes.
the Catholic in Alabama?
No. Tampa campus.
Oh, Tampa.
Springfield College in Massachusetts has 8 campuses all across the country, including one here in Tampa. When I attended Springfield, our classes were held out near Chamberlain High School. They've since moved on Orient Road. You get to go to Massachusetts for the commencement. And so those of us who attended classes here, we went there for the commencement. And it was held at this beautiful campus out, that's where basketball was discovered. Dr. James Naismith, that's his school. There's a statue of him there. And 2 weeks after commencement, it was held at a beautiful outdoor setting. 2 weeks later, a tornado came through, tore up that campus. We just missed it by 2 weeks. So I attended the Tampa campus, and they're still going strong.
One more question?
Yes, sir.
Yes, I wanted to ask something about the Jackson panels. I know it's been there for years, and it's such vital history for the city of Tampa. And I haven't been keeping up to date too much on them, sorry to say, but I know they want to save it, and they should do whatever they can. And I know the city's been working for a number of years, and some progress has been made. In fact, I was able to go inside the house. They had a tour 15, 20 years ago or more, working downtown. And I'm glad that I was able to go inside the house. There were certain rooms that we could not go into. But it's certainly vital, again, to the city of condition of the house, but the history, and it needs to be salvaged, saved somehow. And what is the status of that currently? I have not been in touch with what's happening, but they try to do more and more, and the preservation of it is so important. But I don't know, what are some of the answers in city council, in some cities of Tampa, who has control of that? And I guess they're fighting maybe because of the parking companies around there. Is there something, a good positive message that is happening to help continue the history of the Jackson House? That's been around, in fact, I was turn of the century, or I worked for the county starting in '86, and it was in better shape then, of course, when we were able to take the tour. But to be brief, hopefully, I'd like to see what they can do and move forward with that. But I know there's a lot of people, I guess, on both sides, but, you know, I looked at it and it just seemed like it's getting worse. But by the grace of God, it's standing.
Is that a question for me or for the council members?
Not for you specifically.
Well, let me
I just wondered if anybody
let me say this.
know the status of what's happening.
Okay, here's the status of the Jackson House. Contact Dr. Carolyn Collins. She is the chairman of the Jackson House Foundation. They have been working behind the scenes. I do know this, they have been working behind the scenes. It may look like nothing's happening. I'm not privy to everything that's going on. Our official position at the Tampa Bay History Center, and we're going to come to our councilwoman, is that all comments about the Jackson House come from our president and CEO, Steve J. Roberts. I am not him.
Right.
I just want to say that there will be a report coming before council from the Jackson House. I believe it's on the agenda coming up soon. So that's one of the things we can say. It is on the agenda for them to present to us an update.
Okay,
Great progress. It's good to hear that.
right. Yes, sir, Mr. Weaver.
This week, don't you have a program that will include some of the music, like Ella Fitzgerald, Miranda, and Sister Taskett there at the Jackson House? One of the programs at the new Black History Museum, Old St. James Church, there in the middle of Encore, is going to include some of that music this week at some of your events.
Ashley, you want to respond to that? Because I think you know a little more about it than I do.
In the brochure, it's in the middle column, Central Ave Live. It's going to be from 5 to 8 at Campus Black History Museum.
What I can say is that on Wednesday at 5:30 at Tampa's Black History Museum, and if you're not sure where that is, that's Encore, the old Central Park Village development, 1213 Central Avenue, the new Central Avenue, which runs directly east of Perry Harvey Park. At that red brick church, we're having a program about the history of the Scrub, which is that neighborhood. I talked a little bit about that today. And because so many things are going on this week, I mean, there are brochures with all of those activities listed in them. I know Shirley may respond to some of that also. Just about every time we have a program at Tampa's Black History Museum, there will be some music, just about every time we open the doors, because that's part of that legacy of that neighborhood. So that's going to be happening Wednesday at 5:30. And if you check the brochure, there are many other programs going on, including some at the Tampa Bay History Center.
Thank you so much, Fred.
Always do that. Thank you. Always do that. Thank you, Shirley.
We continue to have great speakers. Thank you, thank you, thank you to both of you. And we miss you, Judge Salsinas, but hopefully you'll be back. Anyway, let's give them another great round of applause. We certainly hope that you've enjoyed today's program. We would like to thank the Mayor's Youth Corps for all of their assistance. They have assisted us for several years now, and we appreciate everything. They do everything. They're serving us, and we really appreciate it. Hopefully, they're getting a lot of information, and we may see them as council members, mayor, department heads, who, you never know. And thank you, Molly, for everything. Would you stand so we can see the fearless leader? We would also like to thank CTTV for recording our program, and so look for that. And it's also on YouTube, right? It will be on YouTube. I would also like to thank our Archives and Records Division of the City Clerk's Office. The team is led by Jennifer Dietz. Thank you, Jennifer and Allison, our photographer. Everybody works. Really, really appreciate that. I would also like to thank our office, City Clerk's Office, for assisting in every way. Thanks, Corinthia, my deputy, support techs, etc. And thanks also to council members, everybody. Y'all are so supportive. And as I said at senior staff meeting, you can't help but fall in love with the city of Tampa if you haven't already. I mean, we have a great city, and yes, I'm biased. There will be many other great history programs during Archives Awareness Week, and I'd like to briefly ask Jennifer to come up and talk about a few of them. And afterwards, we're going to adjourn and meet down in the Sister Cities room for some nice refreshments.
Okay, I'm going to make this quick because I know everyone wants to get down and get some birthday cake. We have so many great programs happening this week. We have 11 more after today, including one this evening at the Jan Platt Library about bookbinding. But just make sure that you pick up one of these brochures because this has everything going on this week. You can also go to tampagov.net/AAW, which is Archives Awareness Week, and this has the full list of programs. So hope to see you at some more during the week. And thank you all so much for coming.